Primitive, helpless, clumsy. Charlie Chaplin dressed as a comic waiter in dicky and tail coat. That's the traditional view of the penguin. A very backward bird indeed. One that can't even fly and sometimes can't walk upright. When it tries to do so, it can only waddle. The picture is very far from the truth. What follows aims to put the record straight. It's all entirely in praise of penguins. Helpless? To start with, ask yourself how many seabirds, or for that matter, how many aquatic mammals, could survive in this sort of situation. Yet these chin-strapped penguins bounce like rubber balls in surf that would kill you or I. With their strengthened rib cages and insulating layers of fat, they can withstand the worst the surf on Deception Island in the sub-Antarctic can do to them. Some of the first penguins ever seen and recorded by a white man were these in Patagonia. They're called Magellan penguins, after the great Portuguese navigator Ferdinand Magellan, who voyaged to South America in 1521. Magellan described them as geese. Seeing them walk upright, it's hard to imagine why. But he and his crew probably first sighted them swimming like this. A more understandable confusion came later. In the early 1600s, sailors called this flightless bird, which they found in the North Atlantic, a penguin. The great auk, which became extinct in 1844 due to persecution, was a member of a quite different family, the Alcidae, to which belong guillemots and puffins. The auks carry out the role of penguins in northern waters and look rather similar. People don't always realize that there aren't any penguins in northern waters. All 18 species live in the southern hemisphere. Only 2, the Adelies and the Emperors, are true Antarctic penguins. The remainder, with one exception, nest almost entirely on coasts and islands between the Tropic of Capricorn and the Antarctic Circle. The exception is the Galapagos penguin on the equator. But the Galapagos species relies on the constant stream of cold water from the Humboldt Current. Penguins come in several sizes and a variety of head markings. This is the Magellan. The chin strap. The rockhopper, looking as though it wishes it could fly. The erect crested penguin. The Gentoo with distinctive white headband. The northernmost species from the Galapagos Islands. The Adelie from the Antarctic, basic model for all those jokes about little men in dinner jackets. Smallest of all, the little blue or fairy penguin from Australia and New Zealand. It weighs about 1¼ pounds. And the giant 60-pound emperor, least accessible of all the species, and here, as rarely seen, with a chick. Most beautiful penguin? The title must surely go to the next largest in size after the emperor. The king penguin is distinguished by the brilliant orange colour of its head marking. It's somewhat similar in appearance to the emperor, though only half its weight, and its nesting habits are quite different. Emperors have the most remarkable breeding story of all. They lay their eggs in the endless night of the Antarctic winter. The males stand huddled together on the ice shelf, perhaps 60 miles from open water, in temperatures of below -40 degrees. Meantime, the females trek off to the sea to catch fish, miraculously arriving back at the moment the eggs hatch out. These kings, by contrast, nest in summer and in comparatively accessible places. This colony is in South Georgia. They brood their eggs and chicks on their feet under a bulge at the base of the stomach. a technique similar to that used by the male emperors in the howling, freezing night of Antarctic winter. Sheer size distinguishes the lone chinstrap from the king's, but with similar size species, the varied head markings help each to recognize the other. As individuals, penguins probably know one another best by sound. To our ears, penguin song is not a melodious noise. People are apt to think of penguins as primitive because their wings can't get them airborne. This is a freak, by the way, a white Adelie. In fact, penguins have very efficient wings. They're more rigid than those of other birds, but they have an aerofoil section exactly like an aircraft wing. Penguins fly very well indeed, but they fly underwater. See how they beat with both wings simultaneously. The tiny scale-like feathers reduce drag. The technique they use when flying underwater is very similar to that of their northern counterparts, the puffins and the guillemots. But of course, unlike penguins, puffins and guillemots can fly in air as well as water. Penguins use their webbed feet purely as a rudder. Their compact bodies and dense bones help keep them submerged. They weigh just less than the water they displace. They can dive to 60 or 70 feet and have been known to stay under for 6 minutes. Like all seabirds, penguins only come ashore at breeding time. The rest of the year they spend at sea, where food in the form of krill, squid and small fish is plentiful. Porpoising is a favorite way of traveling, though they move far faster when submerged. Porpoising enables them to breathe in and out while they're in the air. Magellans and their close relatives in South Africa, Peru and the Galapagos nest at the northerly end of the penguin's range. Unlike the Antarctic and subantarctic birds, they nest in burrows. You can't do that in the rocky or frozen lands of the far south. This is a Magellan colony, or rookery as it's called, in Patagonia. It's sometimes said that the reason penguins don't exist in the northern seas is that they couldn't compete with the large predators there, like grizzly and polar bears and Arctic foxes. But it isn't quite as simple as that. Penguins have plenty of competitors in the southern hemisphere. The armadillo isn't above stealing an egg or two. Yet penguins exposed to these threats continue to thrive and rear their young. This Magellan is denying her 2 well-grown chicks predigested food so that they have to struggle to get it, an education for the hardships of food gathering in later life. And of course, all penguin colonies are subject to continual raids by bird predators, gulls and skuas especially. The absence of large mammal predators just doesn't explain why penguins have kept to southern latitudes and have never colonized the Arctic. More likely to be the limiting factor is that penguins need water of a consistently chilly nature. Free as they are to voyage long distances in the open ocean, they evolved in the south and have never been willing or able to cross the varied temperatures of the tropics to expand northwards. When it comes to predation by large mammals, the danger for penguins lies in the sea. These gentoos in the Falkland Islands have come down for a drink. The salt water is no problem to them. They have special glands in their heads to dispose of the salt. Their nervousness is due to something quite different. Sea lions, and further south in the Antarctic, leopard seals, regard a penguin as a rewarding snack and know just where to find it. If they stay together, they've got a chance of confusing the hunters by sheer numbers. But one gentoo ventures out alone. A brief flurry in the breakers, and the gentoo has gone. For penguins, safety very definitely lies in numbers. And as their increasing numbers show, the system is one that works. Individual losers are weeded out and become food for the skuas. In a moment, we'll be looking at the penguins who cope with apparently much tougher living conditions in the far south, but take it all in their waddling stride. Penguins have been around in the southern oceans for at least 45 million years. Fossils show that they weren't very much different from the birds we know today, though some prehistoric penguins were about 5 feet tall. During those 45 million years, they evolved some strange nesting habits. The little rockhopper penguin has devised a system that looks to us like sheer, unnecessary hard work, but it's obviously highly beneficial to the species. They nest on rocky islands as far apart as the Falklands and Tristan da Cunha, and as you can see, they do an awful lot of hopping. The reason for all this hopping is that they usually nest high up on a cliff. So, to reach their rookery, they have to scale the rocks. On such a rugged surface, the waddle used by other species just wouldn't work, so they hop instead. In fact, they hop so much that the rocky steps leading up to a rockhopper's colony are often worn smooth by hundreds of years pounding by penguin feet and claws. The sea lies 250 feet below the colony. When they've got chicks to feed, the adults often make 2 fishing trips a day, which means they must hop up and down 1,000 feet of rock daily. If only those stubby wings could carry this rockhopper down to the sea in one easy swoop. Entering the sea is no problem. The birds just dive off a rock. Coming ashore after a fishing trip is not quite so easy. The rockhoppers have regular landing places, invariably where the rocks shelve gradually into the surf. They time the landing skillfully on the lift of a wave. Some are lucky to make it at the first attempt. The trouble is, there's always another wave close behind. The rockhoppers are never discouraged and simply go back and start again. The ice and snow of the Antarctic. This is the setting in which most people expect to find all penguins. There are only 2 completely Antarctic species, the giant 60-pound emperor and the tiny Adelie. But a few species, like the gentoo, breed on the warmer islands, such as the Falklands, as well as on the Antarctic continent, though they never establish rookeries as far south as the Antarctic Circle. This colony is in the Antarctic Peninsula, the part of the continent that juts northward towards Cape Horn. No one is sure how the gentoo got its strange name. It's probably of Indian origin. One suggestion is that the Falkland Islanders, who first named it, thought the white headband looked like a turban. Gentoos quite often share their rookeries with their closest relatives, the adelies and the chinstraps. That's a chinstrap in the background. The gentoos, the largest of the three, are the most placid. Chinstraps are inclined to be pugnacious and irritable. Gentoos lay 2 eggs and sometimes successfully rear both chicks. On the warmer islands to the north, they often make nests of grass and twigs. On the barren Antarctic continent, a slight hollow decorated with a few pebbles has to do. Growing penguin chicks take a lot of feeding, mainly on krill. But then the cold Antarctic waters abound in euphorsids, the scientific name for this shrimp-like creature. In fact, penguins are booming, and for a tragic reason. Since the slaughter of the Antarctic whales, there's been an even greater abundance of krill, and the penguins have benefited. This nearly fully grown youngster is chasing its parents for its share of the krill harvest. Penguins nest in the Antarctic summer, which lasts from about October to March. This, believe it or not, is a summer's day, the equivalent of a fairly wet June day in Britain. But young penguins are not at all worried by this kind of weather. Penguins are more densely covered with feathers than any other bird. A penguin's main problem is not how to keep warm, but how to remain cool. This day should present no particular problem. There's a southward point beyond which gentoos and chinstraps aren't prepared to nest. The adelies, on the other hand, go right down onto the Antarctic mainland. Adelies spend the winter at sea, feeding along the edge of the pack ice. When the southern spring arrives in early October, they come ashore, returning to the rookery where they were born or where they last bred. Though the pairs don't winter or even return to the rookery together, adelies usually find their mates of the previous year and are faithful to them. The adelie, you could say, is the basic penguin, the little man in the frock coat, the cartoonist's joy. When the male arrives, he sets up a territory on which breeding success depends. They lay 2 eggs, though by no means all successfully rear 2 young. These chicks are nearly fully grown, but they still chase their parents to be fed. There's no shortage of predators on these southern nesting grounds. A parent gallantly defends her young against a whole gang of murderous skuas. By February, the brief Antarctic summer is drawing to a close. The adult adelies are freed from the demands of defending territory and feeding young. The young penguins can now swim to feed themselves. It's time to forsake the ties of the land and find freedom in their natural element, the sea. Tobogganing is often the quickest way of reaching it. These are practically all young birds. You can pick them out by the fact that they have white rather than black chins. Once they've become independent and can swim and feed themselves, there's no longer any bond between parents and offspring. These young adelies will get their full adult plumage in their second year, but they won't breed until they're at least 3 and possibly 5. The last lap to the sea is the sort of ground that rockhopper penguins would cross in a few seconds. The adelies are more at home on snow and ice. In the end, they all make it. Their parents aren't nearly so lucky. After the rigors of the nesting season, they molt again, usually out on the ice. And since they can't swim during the molt, this means another period of fasting. They've already fasted once while hatching their eggs. But food is so plentiful in Antarctic waters that young and old will soon build up body weight and put on fat to withstand the winter. Winter is probably the best time of a penguin's life. So now the young set off on their sea life, porpoising with joyous, instinctive confidence. Some will fall victim to the fiercely predatory leopard seals, but on an ice floe, a seal is no danger. A penguin can move far faster. To human eyes, the penguin's environment is about as hostile as it's possible to imagine. But the penguin is a creature magnificently adapted to its environment. It's delightful, appealing, and successful. And for once, it's pleasant to report that it's doing very nicely, thank you.